Welcome everybody, this is going to be another anticipated releases, this time for March of 2019. We weren't able to meet up to record this one all together, so this one's going to be done with separate audio, so that's why it might seem a little bit different. But we've done it in the past, let's stop stalling and let's dig in.
I'm the most looking forward to Yoshi. Yoshi's Crafted World, I believe, is the official title. I played the demo right when it came out, and it's just so adorable. It's a typical Yoshi game where it's very easy. I mean, granted, I also played on easy mode because I didn't want to actually challenge myself to do anything hard. I just wanted to, feel good about myself after playing some horror games and whatnot. But it's a very peaceful game. The music is just as soothing as I remember any other of the Yoshi games being, and the gameplay is actually really fun. From what I've been able to see from people who have reviewed the game is that it's like any of the other Yoshi games where if you want to 100% it can be very challenging, but if you just kind of want to breeze through it and just have a nice casual playtime, then it's just a very easy and relaxing game. So you can kind of make it as frustrating or not frustrating as you want to, which I always love. And the music just, it makes me go to sleep. It's so nice and relaxing, and I really enjoy being able to just kind of relax and have a game or two of those type of games in my in my pocket, because I also like to play very frustrating games and games I have to really grind out things. So it's really nice to just kind of be able to have a rough day and just mindlessly play through a couple Yoshi games, feel better about yourself, and then go to bed.
A game that I want to talk about is Final Fantasy VII coming to Nintendo Switch. There's a couple of reasons why I do want to mention this as an anticipated release. One of them is because Final Fantasy, if you guys have followed the history of the Final Fantasy series, from 6 to 7 is when they split. Final Fantasy VI was released for the Super Nintendo. In America, we got Final Fantasy III. It caused a ton of confusion here, just for the numbering scheme. And Final Fantasy VII is when it moved over to the PlayStation consoles. The PlayStation consoles got all of the Final Fantasies from there, Final Fantasy VIII all the way to Final Fantasy 15. Nintendo has gotten Crystal Chronicles and a couple of other not mainline titles, and it's kind of cool that Final Fantasy IX has already been released for Switch, and Final Fantasies 10, 12, and 7 are still along the way. 7, I would anticipate people saying is it's known as one of the most favorite Final Fantasy games. And I believe that it usually competes with 6 as the best Final Fantasy or some of the most definitive Final Fantasy out there. Some people say 9. I don't want to get into that as much about which is the defining Final Fantasy, but it has a lot of amazings about it. For those who don't know anything about the Final Fantasy series, it has an active time battle system which prioritizes a turn-based battling, but it makes it more interactive, where you kind of have a gauge that gets filled up, and once that gauge gets filled up, you select your attacks from there. I've already had some of the story spoiled for me, but it looks fantastic as a game that I've been meaning to play for a while. Mike's been telling me how much I would love Sephiroth as a villain. Everybody in the cast just seems so cool. I know that I've already had things spoiled for me with Erik. Either way, it's a great JRPG, and it was basically one of the ways that Sony almost made itself as the RPG system in a way. They had definitely had more other games with Crash Bandicoot, they had Spyro the Dragon, they had so many other games on there, but if you wanted to play a Square Enix game, it was on a Sony console. But now, after that whole disc cartridge debacle, now they're kind of bending relations with Nintendo, as you saw I Am Setsuna, Lost Sphere both got released on the Nintendo Switch, with another one along the way, which I think is a great advancement for. I love RPGs, I love JRPGs, and I wish that this relationship continues, and that we can see more games along the sort. I want to mention, though, that Final Fantasy IX did not get the original graphics ported over. That's what I'm disappointed about. Final Fantasy usually prided themselves, and you can see it on how it hurt them in Final Fantasy XIII, and how it used to be a graphical powerhouse, and how it was always cutting-edge graphics. For the time, remember, these were older games, but they used to be cutting-edge graphics, and that obsession with graphical quality kind of hurt them in a little bit, and that's one of the reasons I want to talk about it. I wanted to get the authentic experience with Final Fantasy IX, and I wanted to see those very blocky PS1 graphics. With Final Fantasy IX, that didn't happen. They kind of got, I believe, as a mobile port, and that's what I'm worried about. If you want to just port a game, I would like the regular graphics on there. If you're porting mobile one, it's designed to have a user interface or UI that's for your fingers and for a handheld, like being put in your phone, not on a controller and being played on a TV. And that's what I'm worried about. I would like the authentic experience that would come with playing Final Fantasy IX, and I hope they don't do the same thing with Final Fantasy VII. Because these games have been remade, but it just keeps getting worse reviews if you keep trying to change the graphical style in that way. I would like them to just stick with the original graphics, and I'll probably be getting the game anyway, but that's one of the things that stopped me from getting Final Fantasy IX, even though it's been on my list to play for a really, really long time. But Final Fantasy VII coming to Nintendo Switch, based on the background I gave, it is going to be a pretty big release. I'm sure it's going to be a bestseller, and I believe this is the first time that it got released on a Nintendo console, so that is huge. And I would love to see it do well, but please keep it with the original graphics. You're already making a Final Fantasy VII remake that's down the road, that's all action, an all action system, not an active time battle system, so you can experiment with that, but please keep the one for the Switch, the original kind of blocky PS1 graphics. If you can keep it that way, I will enjoy it so much more.
All right, so just to make sure that we kind of touch on all the big releases coming out this month, because I know there's a lot of stuff that we're probably not going to talk about since we butchered a recording and didn't find a good time, and we've kind of shown the amount of games we want to talk about. I'm just going to give a quick summary of kind of the rest of the games that Nick and Travis didn't talk about. Starting with Devil May Cry 5, that's the one that I'm kind of the most excited for. For those of you that don't know, it's a hack and slash game. It's an absolutely incredible franchise that comes from Capcom. The main character is Dante. Dante's kind of the face of the franchise. He's a character that a lot of people know. He's got the long, luscious gray hair flowing. And then Nero's also going to be a playable character. And there's going to be a brand new playable character in the franchise now as well. And so there's going to be a lot of familiar faces and then a lot of new faces being added to the scene as well. The purpose of the gameplay, you can succeed by mashing it away. It's a hack and slash. The game completely owns that that's the type of genre that it is. But there's significant awards and there's significant points. There's like a scoring system to be earned for doing things in a stylish fashion. And so you can spam away and probably succeed in the game. But if you want to unlock the harder difficulties, or if you want to get S ranks on certain levels, then you're going to be required to do certain tricks, right? Whether that's mix and match and use variety in your combos, do better timing, go for enemies at certain weak points. The game really rewards you for playing in a stylish manner, and so I think a stylish hack and slash is a good way to phrase this game. The engine that's being used is the RE engine. I only bring that up because I'm a huge Resident Evil fan. It's the engine that was used for Resident Evil 7. The purpose is for photorealism. Graphics is kind of the target they're going for. Personally, I don't know if the engine's great for graphics, at least from what I saw. It did a decent job, but it wasn't the greatest thing I've ever seen. But I think it's an improvement from the engine that it used to use, and it'll be nice seeing how the RE engine could be applied to games outside the Resident Evil franchise. One thing that I feel like needs to be mentioned is that the game has in-game purchases. I feel like that's something that's just required to mention these days. Likely it's not going to hinder the actual game progression at all. It's not going to be a necessary pay to win. It is going to be for the progression, the level up system, but these games are pretty nice about the level up scheme anyway, and at the end of the day, leveling up is not even super crucial at a certain point. It's not like an RPG where you have to grind a lot, so it shouldn't be a major issue. It's an awesome franchise. Don't let some small microtransaction that's irrelevant get to you. And I think you would enjoy it if you like the other Devil May Cry games. So the rest of the games I'm not going to talk about as long. I say that now, but I probably will. The second one is Dead or Alive 6. This is probably already out. I know that we're releasing this kind of late. That's kind of my fault because I messed up. Sorry, Nick. But this is coming out the first day in March. At this point, I probably already have it and have played it. It's a fighting game with a lot of boobs and butts. That's basically what this franchise is known for. In fact, it's probably almost more famous for its volleyball series. Or not necessarily volleyball, but the beach island setting where they go and they gamble and just lay out in their bikinis on an island. It's Japanese only, but we all know what it is, thanks partially to the Game Grumps. But it's an iconic franchise for that, and it didn't start off that way, right? It started off as a fighting franchise on the PlayStation 1, and even though that original game absolutely wrecks my heart because I'm so god-awful at it, it's a franchise that I kind of like. It's different than other fighters. Compared to Soul Calibur, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, this game doesn't rank high in terms of its combat, but it ranks high in terms of its quirkiness, It kind of knows it's a perverted, weird fighting game where you have girl fighters with minimal clothing, and it kind of makes fun of itself, and it still has kind of a semi-serious story with it, and not all the characters are just big boobed, right? There is some sort of I guess, respectful model that the game goes for. It's not completely shameless in that regard, but it's a fun game for a fighting game. Undoubtedly, we're gonna have some $100 almost nude skins coming out, right? That seems to be what this thing does. Is it makes so much money off of extra skins that seemingly get less and less clothing as time goes on. But overall, it's a fun fighting game. Not the greatest fighter in the world, but it's an iconic franchise releasing a new game, so I feel like it's important to mention. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is probably the big release that everyone's excited for. That's kind of not a branch off of another franchise. A lot of comparisons are being made to the Dark Souls franchise. Obviously, this is From Software. Like, the company that's making it is called From Software. So, and that's the company that made Dark Souls and made Bloodborne, and so it makes sense that you would see these comparisons. The thing is, this game doesn't really have RPG elements. There's not going to be leveling up and, you know, a lot of different items to use. It's a lot more focused on the combat, and the big difference in the combat is there's no health bars. You're not whittling down enemies' HP the way you do in the Dark Souls games. Instead, you're going to try to knock your enemies over and make them lose balance, and then try to kill them in one hit with like a killing blow. So it's less about just smashing your enemies until their HP goes to 0, and more like real life, right? Real life sword combat where you're trying to get their defense down so you can strike the heart or the head or whatever the case may be. And so I think that's an interesting fighting system. I think it's an interesting mechanic. I have never, I don't believe, played a game like that before, and so I'm excited to see how it works. The game also has a cool focus on exploration, which I think is kind of nice. So I think it'll be a fun and unique experience. It's set in ancient Japan, so I think that will be cool.
And then another game that I just wanted to shine light to is the Danganronpa Trilogy is coming out. I personally will not be getting it because I already own 1 and 2. It'd just kind of be stupid for me to rebuy those 2 games just to get the third one, where I can probably just buy the third one on its own for a lot less. But if you have not been able to experience the world that is Danganronpa and don't mind the whole very anime aspect of it, highly recommend. Highly recommend. Way back when we did our top 5 games, the first Danganronpa is on my list. 2 is just as good, if not better. I mean, I'm still working on that last conclusion. I promise it's on the way. I have just kind of been having a sore throat for a while, and I haven't had like a very big amount of free time for me to just sit down, because I like to just kind of power through it, because otherwise I have absolutely no idea what happens in Trials, and I like to try and do that. So I promise I will get to that one. But back to the original point. Someone who has not been able to play through Danganronpa, I hope that you don't rule it out just because it looks a little weird, because I mean, it is weird, but you do get really involved with the characters. It does a great job, and I can't wait to actually be able to play 3. I am hoping once I move into an apartment, if I get good Wi-Fi, I'll be able to stream again, and then we can continue those streams, and it'll be glorious.
And the last game I wanted to talk about, I didn't really save the best for last, is The Division 2, though I'm sure there's a lot of people out there excited for it. It's a game that you can play single player, but it's absolutely best enjoyed co-op. Like I said, I wasn't a major fan of it. It felt like it missed the mark in a lot of ways. It was really only fun if you had a consistent friend to play with, so somebody that you would be leveling up and doing the game with consistently. It focuses heavily on co-op, so as I mentioned, going in single player, you still join parties sometimes, and you don't really get the full experience, especially if you're not communicating with your partners and things like that. So I don't know. If you have a partner, I think it's an enjoyable experience. Division 2 seems like it's going to be kind of the same in terms of that regard, and so I would only recommend it if you think you either really enjoy playing with strangers or you have a friend to contact and to, talk to while also playing the game. The game is a shooter with RPG elements, so you grow and you level your character up, and you can level them up in certain things in terms of what they wear, and I don't remember the exact ones. I want to say there was jumping and running speed and damage you can do with certain weapons and reload speed and things like that. I could be wrong about some of those, but it's that type of level up system. It also relies heavily on survival components. There was especially a hardcore mode where you really had to make sure that you were wearing clothes appropriate for the weather so that you wouldn't freeze to death or things like that. And so there's a lot of little elements that this game and franchise does really well. And so I'm not going to say that The Division is necessarily a bad game. I think it gets a lot of these fun and interesting points right. It's just the single player experience wasn't there for me. So it is possible to play single player. I wouldn't recommend it if it's anything like the original Division, but it's a cool game. These are all 4 games that I'm excited for. I think it's going to be interesting to see the reception for each of these games. There's 2 from long-standing franchises, in Devil May Cry and Dead or Alive. Sekiro is kind of a new IP coming out, and then The Division 2 is kind of a sequel to a game that received relatively mixed reactions. And so overall, I'm excited to see how this month is going to turn out and how things are going to play out.
So because we are a Nintendo channel, I want to at least mention these games. I know Mike and Travis have both talked about games that they're all looking forward to, and there's not really a ton of big Switch releases besides the one that Travis mentioned, but there is a 3DS release, and because I'm usually the 3DS person, I'm going to mention it, and that's Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn that's coming for 3DS, which was originally a Wii game, Kirby's Epic Yarn, that came out. And, well, I don't think it's a big secret. I'm not, like, a huge fan of Kirby games. Me and a friend of mine did, like, the co-op of, I think, Kirby Superstar or whatever was on the SNES Classic. It was fun. It didn't really encapsulate me as much that I thought. I never really get too into Kirby games. They're fun, but I never like get absorbed into a Kirby game. And I really don't know why, but Kirby's Epic Yarn, Extra Epic Yarn, is coming to 3DS, which was originally just a Wii game, but it's coming to 3DS. So again, as we said before, 3DS on its like last leg, and they keep trying to support it with a couple of remakes here and there, and I appreciate that, but let's face it, everybody's all about the Switch now. And you can make a couple of great deals, and I think that this is another good game to bring to 3DS. Because of the fact that the Wii was such a big install base, the 3DS was such a big install base as well. I know a lot of things are coming to Switch, and there's already a Kirby game on the Switch. The Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn to come to 3DS is pretty nice. The only Kirby game that I think I've gotten close to finishing was, at least in terms of on a solo campaign, was Kirby's Campus Curse for DS. And again, it's fun, but it's a Kirby game, and I don't get as much involved in Kirby games. But Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn coming to 3DS. So just as a heads up, there's a lot of games here for people that I believe you guys will all have a great time enjoying when they come out. And again, I would argue March is a little bit bigger of a month than I expected. So hopefully you guys all enjoyed. We'll be doing these again for April releases at the end of March or near the very early beginning of March. So have a great day, everybody. And we'll hopefully be back with more Overcooked or Mario Kart for you. See you guys later.